Greetings, modern world historians. You've made it to lesson number 4 on the Cold War. Today's topic is nuclear proliferation. So congratulations, you've made it halfway through our Cold War lessons. And so since we are halfway, I want to take this moment at the start of our video today to do a quick recap of where we've been so far. So lesson 1 was about the aftermath of World War II, and we specifically looked at the Yalta Conference and the start of the Cold War. Lesson number 2 was about U.S. foreign policies of the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. And then yesterday's lesson number 3 was about the U.S. involvement in expressing those foreign policy goals, specifically in Korea, Vietnam, and in Cuba. So today we're going to be looking at the hallmark of the Cold War, which is nuclear proliferation. This is a really fancy word, but it really just means the building up of nuclear weapons. This phenomenon is actually where we get the term Cold War. For a while, tension was increasing between the US and the USSR, and while both sides were pouring resources into their nuclear development, the threat of nuclear war was always constant, but never actually acted upon toward one another. Hence, Cold War. Before we dive into the Cold War arms race and other factors a part of nuclear proliferation in our lesson number 4, I want to start by thanking a particular website that helped me get a lot of resources for today's lesson. Excuse me. It's called ducksters.com. It's an educational website where I got a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So let's get started with nuclear war. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union became engaged in a nuclear arms race. They both spent billions and billions of dollars trying to build up huge stockpiles of nuclear weapons. And they were also trying to place these nuclear weapons in strategic locations around the globe. Near the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was spending about 27% of its total gross national product, GDP, on the military. This was crippling to their economy, and what's really ironic about that is by spending all that money on their military, they ultimately created their own undoing, which leads to the end of the Cold War. So let's talk about the nuclear bomb itself. The United States was the first to develop nuclear weapons through the Manhattan Project during World War II. The US ended the war with Japan by dropping nuclear bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hopefully you can recall both sides of this debate from our own debate last quarter in class. We know that using those nuclear bombs and Japan's ultimate surrender was a very complex decision. Nuclear bombs are extremely powerful weapons. They can destroy an entire city and kill tens of thousands of people. The only time nuclear weapons have been used in war was at the end of World War II by the United States against Japan. The Cold War was predicated on the fact that neither the US nor the USSR actually wanted nuclear war. They did not want to actually destroy the entire civilized world, but they were afraid that the other might. Hence the arms race. So let's talk about the start of the arms race. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb. The world was shocked, and the US did not think that the Soviet Union was going to be that far along in their own nuclear development, and so an arms race began, this feeling of competition and that you needed to beat out the opposite country and get ahead of their technology and make the advancements before they could. In 1952, the United States detonates their first hydrogen bomb. This was an even more powerful version of the nuclear bomb. The Soviets followed up by exploding their first hydrogen bomb in the following year, 1953. Now let's talk about ICBMs. That's an acronym that stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. So ICBMs could be launched from long range as far away as 3,500 miles. Which means that when you're strategically choosing places to put your weaponry, if you have an ICBM, you don't have to be that close to your enemy's territory in order to still strike truly fear and terror in your enemy because they have such a wide range of 3,500 miles. Now let's talk about defense. As both sides, both US and the USSR, continued to develop new and more powerful weapons, there was growing fear of what could happen if war broke out and spread throughout the world. So militaries began to work on defenses such as large radar arrays to tell if a missile had in fact been launched. They also worked on defense missiles that could shoot down ICBMs. At the same time, people built bomb shelters and underground bunkers where they could hide in case of nuclear attack. Meanwhile, in schools, there would be nuclear bomb drills, and deep underground facilities were built for high ranking government officials where they could reside safely. Now, let's talk about our important key term for today, which is mutual assured destruction, which has just the perfect acronym of MAD. MAD, mutually assured destruction. This is one of the major factors involved in the Cold War. It meant that both countries could destroy the other country in the case of attack. It wouldn't matter how successful the first strike was, the other side could still retaliate and destroy the country which first attacked. So for that reason, neither side ever actually used nuclear weapons because the cost would be too high. The reality of MAD, the reality of a mutually assured destruction, is what kept the Cold War cold. Now let's talk about some other countries besides the US and besides the USSR that were developing nuclear bombs of their own. So countries like Great Britain, France, and the People's Republic of China also add their names to the list of countries with nuclear capacity. But as more and more countries are developing the ability to create a nuclear bomb, we're going to see a shift in the Cold War, which we call détente, or arms reduction talks. As the arms race heated up, it became very expensive for both countries to maintain the development. In the early 1970s, both sides realized that something had to give. The two sides began to talk and take a softer line towards one another. The easing of these relations is called détente. You could consider this a melting of the Cold War hostilities or warming of relations between the US and the USSR. In order to try and slow down the arms race, the countries agreed to reduce arms through something called the SALT I and SALT II agreements. SALT is not like table salt, though that's also salt. This type of SALT stands for Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, which brings us to the end of the arms race. For the most part, the arms race came to an end with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War in 1991. Some interesting facts about the arms race, though. The Manhattan Project was top secret. Remember, the Manhattan Project is responsible for developing the nuclear bomb for the United States during World War II. It was so secret that Vice President Truman didn't know about it until he became President Truman. However, Soviet Union leader Joseph Stalin's spies were so good that they actually already knew about the United States nuclear bomb. The US B-52 bomber could fly 6,000 miles in order to deliver a nuclear bomb. It is estimated that by 1961, there were enough nuclear bombs built across the world to, in fact, destroy the entire world. Not a fun fact, but an interesting fact. Today, 2020, the following nations also have added their name to the list of nuclear capability: India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. All of these nations have nuclear capacity. Nuclear proliferation is a very serious topic, and it's a very controversial issue. You all recall how tenuous our nuclear weapon development debate was last quarter. So to end on a more positive note, I want to give you guys, yes, 2 more pop culture references for you to explore if you have the time and the interest. So first up, I highly recommend that you watch a movie called Dr. Strangelove. This is a dark comedy about the accidental use of atomic bombs. And even though it's completely fictional, it actually does help shed light, especially on how mad or insane MAD really was. I first got the recommendation to watch this film from one of my undergraduate professors at Pepperdine, who famously described international law as squishy. So you better believe she had a good movie recommendation. On an even lighter note, I also recommend that you watch the song or the music video for the song Enola Gay by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. So the song name is Enola Gay and the band name is Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. I'll send you guys a link to the YouTube music video. The song is named after Enola Gay, which was the B-29 bomber used by the United States That was the bomber in 1945 that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. So remember, that was the first time an explosive device like this had been used on an enemy target. And this aircraft was named after the mother of the pilot, so her name was Enola Gay. The aircraft was named after her, and then the song was named after the aircraft. So if you watch the music video on YouTube, you'll find that the song is a really strange mix. It's part nuclear war protest and part 80s dance party. So check it out. I guarantee you, you will not regret it. So with that, I'm going to conclude our Cold War lesson number 4 on nuclear proliferation. Please email me your questions and your thoughts, because I know this one is controversial for a lot of people, and a lot of people have different stances regarding the use of nuclear weapons in the world today. And then, as always, be checking Veracross so that you can stay up to speed on all of your requirements. And again, congratulations, because we're halfway through our Cold War lessons. We're doing this, guys. Yeah. Okay, so I will see you next time. Bye, historians.